This is CIS240, Database Design and Development, and we're covering Module 7 of the MindTap book, and this is going to be over SQL. The way that I'm going to handle this is I'm going to work my way through Module 7, looking for SQL commands, and then applying those SQL commands to a database that we developed out of Chapter 6. So this is where it starts. And as a quick overview of the database, it doesn't have a lot in it, but that's okay. It will let us execute the SQL commands. Customer table, fields first, last, state, item table, item ID, item name, item price, order table, and this is the orders that the customer made on the date. And this is the order number and the customer number. And then the order row table for order row 1. This was order ID 1, item ID for quantity. So we have several fields to be picking from throughout here. So let's move into SQL. Now I'm doing this with an Access database, and I am on the home. So I'm going to change over to create, and from create, I'm going to pick query design. Now, Access does provide you a lot of help with this, but that's not the point. We're not learning Access, we're learning SQL. So I'm going to change this to the SQL view, and that just gives me a little place to type in the query language. So we'll start off with one of the first ones, and that is select everything from, and then you tell it the table, and the largest table is order row table. So we'll do that one, order row table. And when we execute this, there is everything from order row table. So this SQL is working correctly. Go back into the SQL view on this. Now, I'll go ahead and get you used to seeing it. It can all be done on one line. It's just spaces do have meaning. They separate things and you end the command with the semicolon. So this is a more normal way of seeing it. This kind of gives you well, it makes it more orderly to take a look at and figure out if you've done something wrong. So that's our first one. Let's move forward in this little bit. And in the rest of the chapter, it is talking about selecting particular fields. So let's go back and take a look at this. Now, we want to select from order row table. And order row table had, well, let's just go with item ID and quantity. Let's say that that's what we're wanting to pull out of order row table, item ID and quantity. So I'll go back into the query, replace this with the name of the field, item ID and quantity. Okay, and then space after that, this should, well, let's run it and see what we come up with. Okay, view, when I clicked on the table, I changed my view. So I'm going to go back into create and query design. Okay, and close this, go back to SQL, where I was, but this gets us there. Okay, so we're going to select order ID and quantity. And we're going to pull this in from the order row table. And that is all one word, no spaces. And end it with a semicolon. And now when we run this, we pick up only those two fields, which is what it's supposed to be. Okay, now we have quantity and order. Let's take a look at which table has in it the amount, which is item price, and that is in the item table. So I'm going to do another query, And on this query, I'm going to go through and say, okay, average purchase is 5 items. So what would be the average value, or 36 times 5 for each of these particular items? So let's go back into query and change that back to our SQL view. Okay, so don't want these particular ones anymore. And I want to do this with item table. So item table, it was, forgot already, item price. That's not too hard to remember. Okay, so item table, item price. And I'll go back to this then and say, all right, I want item table. Okay, and what fields I want is item price, and I want this times our normal purchase, our average purchase, which is 5 items. So we'll say item price times 5. And if I run this one, let's see, there we go. Then here's expression, but it doesn't really have much of a nice title to it. But this is 27 times 5, 15 times 5, and on up. So let's go back into this query and let's actually put some kind of a heading up here. Okay. So our view will go back to SQL, and I can say as, and then give it a title for the column. Now, if I do just all caps right now, that's how it will put the title, but you can also put it in quotes. And so average sale. And if we go back and run this, okay, that needs, well, in this one, we're going to have to just deal with it a little bit. There we go. All right. So this SQL that we just looked at is the one that allows us to do mathematics as well as do a new column heading for whatever we create there. All right. So now let's take a look at math with a date field. And we have a date field, I believe, in the order table. And so the book talks about, well, you know, we have a policy, and the policy is that they can return up to 90 days after purchase. Well, when was 90 days after this purchase? Well, there's an easy way to do it in this. It's not too bad at all. Let's go create a new query. So we start over. Okay, and again, it Access giving us some help here, which we're going to ignore for the time being. Okay, so I'm going to select select order date and order date plus 90, and that's our 90-day return. Okay, now then we want to do this from the order table. Okay, and let's run that and see what we get. So this does help out a little bit. Of course, it's we didn't put a label with it. So let's go back to that and add a label to this. So in this one, as return before, and I'll put that for the column heading, and run this again and extend out our column right there. Okay, return before. And notice this does give us our 90 days on this. And you can see going from March into June, it's not just adding, you know, to the month, it's actually counting the days and setting this date correctly for 90 days. So that comes in handy to be able to do date math is what it's called. Okay, now let's show how to pull fields from different tables using SQL. So let me go back. I'll create a new query, SQL query, and again, get out of the help. Okay, here we go. Now, for this one, just in the example that we'll pull from two tables, from customer table, we had a first and last for first name, last name. And so I'm going to pick up the first name, last name from the customer table, and then go to the order table and pick up the order date so I can see the dates that certain customers, well, that all the customers ordered on. So I'm going to come in here and say select, and this will be first. Let's spell it right and put a space in there. Select. Okay, try that again. First, last, and the space isn't required, but just for readability, I'll put it in there. Then I also want the order date. Okay, now I want this from two different tables. And this will be from the customer table. And following the syntax in the book, we now put in join and the order table. Okay, now the reason that this should work is because, and notice I said should, is because customer table has a customer ID in it. There we go, so we can see the full name. And order table also has a customer ID in it. And so when I say for this to join, the database is supposed to go look to see if there is a common field between them, and there is, and it will use it to join with. That's not quite what's going to happen on this, though. Let's see, let me go back to my query that I'm building. Okay, if I try to run this and run this in on this access table, when I run it, I get this little message. It says it doesn't like what I've done, and I tell it okay, and it comes back and says there's something wrong with the join. And you go back and look at the SQL in the book and look at this, find out that what I'm doing matches what the book is saying, except there was a warning earlier in the book that says, depending upon the database you use, every database manufacturer adds their own little flavor to SQL. And this is one of the flavors that's done by Microsoft with Access. If I'm going to join two tables, it doesn't matter if the field name is the same or not. I have to tell it exactly which fields to match on. So I'm going to say customer table dot, let's see, equals, no, customer table dot customer ID. And I want that to equal order table dot customer ID. Now, there is a problem. There's a keyword that goes here in Access, and that keyword is on. Okay, so customer table join order table, do the keyword on and say you're lining it up where, oh, helps if you do this spelling correctly. Customer ID of the customer table equals the customer ID of the order table. And let's see what happens now when we try to run that. Still doesn't like it for some reason. Okay, so we click on this and find out that it doesn't like the word join by itself. There's so many joins, Access requires you to say which join. So I'm going to do an inner join. And what an inner join says is only show me the customers who actually have an order in the order table. So if I have customers that haven't ordered recently and it's not showing up in the order table, I would not see those customers. So in this case, though, every customer has something in the order table. So now then, when we do view, finally, it likes it. Okay, and notice it does repeat. Okay, so This is Joe Smith. This is every order that Joe Smith had in the order table. And by the way, those will, well, it does repeat the names. And there's things we can do in SQL. We'll save that for a little later though. Okay, so that is joining two tables. Let me go back to the SQL view so we can see it. All right. So select out the fields that you want. And these selections can be in, it doesn't matter in any order. If I did last comma first, then I would get last name, first name. If I started with order date, it would show up first. And you have to modify this for access. So just be aware this is an access modification to get that to work. Okay, so now let's look at the difference between an inner join and an outer join, which I mentioned earlier. To do this, I need to add in one more customer to the customer table that does not have an order of any kind. So I'm going to come in here and this will be customer number 5. Okay, and just pick a name, any name, Abigail. It's his first name, yeah, Abigail. Oh, sorry. Tab over. There we go. Now then, Abigail. Wilson. And lives in Texas. Okay. So here's our next customer, which we have added in. Now, again, in an access database, when that little pencil is there, it tells you that this is a change that hasn't been saved to the database. Once I hit enter, then it is saved to the database. So I now have Abigail Wilson, which does not have a match in the order table. And if I go back to my query 4 and run it again, notice that we do not have Abigail showing up. So let's go back into our SQL and change this to an outer join. Okay, and turn around and run this one. Uh-oh, it did not like that. And it's telling us it does not like outer join on this one. And the reason for that is when you do an outer join with two tables, you have to tell it which of the two tables is going to pull everybody. It's going to pull everybody from whether there's a match or not. Well, I want to pull everybody from the left table and only those from the right table where there is a match. So let's try to run this and see what that tells us. There we go. And notice that Abigail Wilson does show up in this one, even though there was not a match. And we had just run this with the inner join still in effect, and Abigail did not show up. Okay, so if I go back now to my query and I change this to a right outer join, okay, and run this again, you'll notice we get everything from the right table, which was the order table, but we only, there's no guarantee that you get everybody from the left table when you do this. All right, so that is the inner join and the outer join. Let me take us back to our SQL view. And I think I'll take this one back to the left because that's the one where I placed an extra person in this. Run it one more time. There we go. And now Abigail shows up. This would be of interest if you were looking for customers who hadn't ordered in a while and you're wondering why. So back to SQL view. Okay, next thing that is mentioned in module 7 is something called a cross join, also known as a Cartesian join. And we're going to take a look at that and then don't ever do it. Okay, there's a real simple reason for this. All of my tables are so small. Okay, order table has just 5 in it. What else have we got here? Item table has just 5 in it. Okay, let me just show you. Okay, so let's create a new query. All right, and get rid of the help. Go to my SQL view. Okay, and so this is how you do a Cartesian or a cross join in Access. So I'm going to select all the fields from, well, again, it helps if you spell things right. And let's see, let me take the, I'll just do order table. And I'm going to do a Cartesian product with the item order row table. Let's do order row table. Okay, and it does mention in the book that there's commands that go here that Access does not recognize, but you get the same effect by simply putting a comma in between here. Let's see, I click on run. We got a bunch of rows. And this is what I'm trying to warn you about. I guess that you'd run across some cases where you'd actually need to use this, but this is just from very small database. Okay, we got a bunch of rows showing up. And so that's something you want to be careful of. And I suggest that unless you know exactly why you're doing a Cartesian product of the two tables, just don't. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one. You've seen it, now you know what it does. Do I want to save the changes? No. All right, so let's do another query. This one will be fairly simple. Create and go back into design view, get rid of the help and go over to SQL. Okay, now then, this one's just going to be being able to pick the order that it sorts in. And so I'm going to select first and last, and I'm going to do that from the customer table, spelled correctly. Okay, and I'm going to do it in order by first. And like I said, nothing special here, just one table full of some fields, but I want it in order by first name. And if you'll recall, we put Abigail in as the last one. So when I run this, notice that she shows up as the first one. So that does give you some ordering on this. So nothing big on that one. Okay, so now let's take a look at being a little more selective about what we're going to pull out of our database. We're going to go into the order row table, and we're going to pull out all of the cells where the item ID equals 2. So I'm going to look at item ID in quantity out of the order row table and just look at this particular cell for item for a particular item. So let's go create a new query, query design, all the help, thank you. Okay, so on this one, we're going to select the order ID, not wasn't the order ID, that was the item ID in the quantity. Okay, so we're going to select the item ID and the quantity. And this will be from the order item, where is mine? From the order table. Item ID and quantity. Good heavens. Okay, that's from the order row table. Yep, some of these days are like this, order row table. And I'm going to add in a where, and this is where my item ID equals 2. And so let's run that and see what we get from there. And so we get only item IDs 2 in the quantity. Now, one thing to notice on this last SQL that I put in there, oh, wrong one. What did I? Okay, I want the SQL view. One thing to notice on this is that I didn't capitalize. Access accepted that, but it's still, it helps if you'll go ahead and capitalize all your keywords. So I'm going to do that. And then we'll look at one more item in this video, and I'm going to do it right here. You can use logical operators on this. So I can say where item ID equals 2 or item ID equals 4. And then if I run that one, notice that we get both 4 and 2. And notice that it's not in order. So let's go back and fix that. So we'll add to this order by item ID. Okay, and try that one again. And now then that is in order. Okay, so that's look at most of the material. There's a few things that I left out, and we'll either talk about those in class or I'll answer questions via email on those. So thank you on this. And again, this was module 7 for CIS240 database design. And